Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better, and if you want to keep up to date with all things Clown Decade, please do subscribe to the channel and of course become a member. Today we are finishing off Thomas Nicholas's video on Starmer and Farage. If you have not caught the first two parts of this series, please do go back and watch them first, links down in the description. I'm assuming you've watched them, so no introduction needed. We're getting straight into part 3, which is the lead up to the last election and the initial slow but steady rise of reform.
If a white person has a black accent, that's considered to be a crime. You know, they should be cancelled.
It depends in what context. If you're taking a piss, then you're taking a piss. But if you're not, then you're not.
So
Right, okay.
I think he probably sounded like this.
Here, man.
Right.
My name is Joseph
Scattergun.
Larash. Me going on big batty ship. Look at them propellers.
Crazy.
I don't even know where she is.
Yeah, that's a clip from Finn vs. History. If you have not watched Finn vs. History, I would highly recommend it. Very funny channel with absolutely no historical facts given whatsoever. I just kind of want to make the point of how quickly things have moved over the past few years. Woke very much put away in some ways. Obviously, this is about Nigel Farage making it on I'm a Celebrity for over £1 million. And when he was there, he was normal 80% of the time and putting out opinions the other 20% that got people into arguments. It was a very interesting watch, to be quite honest with you.
It's November 2023, and Nigel Farage is taking part in the 23rd series of the ITV reality show I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
He explains I'm a Celeb. For those of you who don't live in Britain, it's a very, very large reality TV show where celebrities go into the Australian jungle, live in a camp with very little to entertain them and very basic food unless they do crazy challenges that are set with a load of scorpions, snakes and creepy crawlies and the like. And obviously there's a lot of time for people to chat to each other and that all gets recorded too. That's all you need to know.
It might seem like a fall from grace, but the show has a reputation for being a good way to launder one's reputation, particularly for politicians.
Yeah, he goes into Matt Hancock going on the show to try and effectively rehabilitate his image after being a terrible, terrible health secretary during the pandemic. Plus he cheated on his wife as well and destroyed his family, and nobody ever seems to have a go at him for that for some reason, despite, frankly, that being worse than the way he handled the pandemic, because hindsight, Britain didn't handle it really that badly compared to other countries. It wasn't good, but it wasn't the worst either.
Taking part in the show is perhaps less out of the ordinary for Nigel. He does like a good stunt after all. But his decision to do so is no doubt helped by the fee. Nigel is paid a record-breaking £1.5 million for his participation.
Well, yeah, I don't really blame him. I'd eat cockroaches for £1.5 million. I don't think Matt Hancock got that much money. In fact, I think Matt Hancock would have paid to go on the show.
That's over 7 times the salary he would have earned for being an MP. And he does well. Or mostly. His time in the jungle ends up being a brutal mirroring of his political career.
The cattiness in this video is so funny. It's a brutal mirroring of his political career. He came third. Again, that's pretty good. And being considered third when you can barely hold a seat in Parliament, yeah, that's really good as a political outsider. You know, he's beat 5 other very well-established parties. I'm not gonna knock him for that.
Seeing him get to the final 3, only to then be beaten by the baddie from the Rocky spin-offs and a guy from Made in Chelsea.
2 much less divisive people, yeah, makes sense.
And yet, it helps him achieve what appears to be his new goal, becoming an influencer. Which is perhaps Nigel simply embracing the role he's always been playing in one sense or another.
Well, yeah, it's just another income stream. Why would you... People like Nigel Farage. I like Nigel Farage. Why would he not capitalise on that?
After all, even as a member of the European Parliament, Nigel's never really done much in the way of politics. He submitted no motions, no reports, and no amendments. He had one of the worst attendance records in the whole chamber.
Well, yeah, that's because the MEPs couldn't really do anything. They were there basically to rubber stamp laws handed down by the council. That was it. They don't have debates really or anything like that. That was part of that was part of the whole narrative and debate from the Leave side. It was an entire bureaucracy. The people you elect can't actually really do anything. And most of the time, Nigel Farage was in this country campaigning for UKIP. So yeah, I'm not shocked at that.
And so why even bother pretending? There are plenty of other ways to change people's minds, particularly in an age so replete with opportunities to reach people. It's no massive leap for him to try his hand at news broadcasting.
No, that wasn't news broadcasting. LBC was a talk show. There's a massive difference there. Once again, you have a man who you have just admitted was effectively the third place politician in Britain, despite not winning any seats as an MP, apart from one by-election, of course, and that wasn't even him. It's kind of no wonder that LBC gave him a show where he could talk to people and broadcast his opinions along with other people. But yeah, that's not news broadcasting.
And so, when insurgent far-right news channel GB News launches, Farage signs a contract to man a self-titled evening show.
Insurgent far-right news channel, eh? Don't give away too many of your biases, I might get bored.
Like the rest of the channel's broadcasting, the production is shoddy. It looks like it's produced in the drama studio of a regional FE college by well-meaning if rarely competent students.
Yeah, and then they end up getting more money and invested in the studio and it's looking more professional than ever now. It was an awful launch, even I remember that, but can't say it didn't work out. It's the old adage, you know, just make the thing and then make it better over time. That's exactly what's happened with GB News, and pretty much everyone on the right wing's happy with that.
But perhaps that's because all the money's wound up in Nigel's pocket. It will later be revealed that he's pocketing more than £1.2 million a year from the show.
Well, yeah, he's a big attraction to the channel, and ultimately it's up to GB News and with Nigel to agree on a payment for a contract. Turns out that's over £1 million. Good for Nigel, I say. Also, all of those articles are from 2024. GB News launched in 2021. I'm not being funny, but, you know, that's 4 years ago now. And now they're the biggest news channel going, bigger than Sky and bigger than BBC. Yeah, let's not poo-poo them. If anything, GB News are a massive thing to point out that the free market works. Oh, but it's a far-right insurgent news channel. Well, I guess that's what the people want then. Maybe you should come up with better arguments, Mr. Nicholas.
That being said, how much influencing he's actually doing remains to be seen. The show...
Not being funny, but this video came out 2 weeks ago, if that. That was around the time that Farage and Reform started getting 30-odd% in the polls. He will have been making this video over, I don't know, a couple of weeks, something like that, before he published it. They've been top of the polls for ages. Why are you questioning how much influence he has? He's clearly got an awful lot.
It is by far the most popular show on GB News.
So he's clearly very influential then. Influential enough to command over £1 million a year to work there. He doesn't even turn up half the time to his own show. He's an MP now.
With more than 50,000 regular viewers. But GB News fails to compete with existing higher budget news channels.
Well, yeah, back in 20... Wow, I can't believe that it was struggling when it started. Wow, that's a surprise. Are you kidding me?
By December 2021, it's stuck with just 0.2% of UK viewership share.
Wow, crazy. Fast forward 4 years and GB News is at the top of that list. Love to see it. Again, this guy has a really weird obsession with pointing out, oh, look at this crazy far-righty. Look how he starts from basically nothing. And almost has a cadence here. He did it in the part 1 and 2 as well, of saying, look how pathetic they are. When in reality, yeah, that's normal when you start off. You won't have that many people watching or listening to you until actually you earn your own respect, which Farage and GB News, by the way, have. Let's not forget as well, that was a massive campaign by leftists at the time to get advertisers to stop not advertise on GB News, and it actually worked in some cases. Like, they were climbing uphill, and they still won.
Nigel has a little more success on TikTok, where his freshly minted account climbs to more than 1 million followers. Yet it's his videos for the website Cameo which become particularly notorious.
Sigma on the wall, who's the skibbidiest of them all. Wagwan Ted, you sussy jungus.
You get the idea with that, and to some people that might be humiliating, but to be honest with you, if I was paid £75 to say some nonsense, yeah, I'd do it. Fine.
Soon, Nigel is by far the most watched British politician on the internet. He's also raking it in.
Oh, he goes through his income. I don't care. I get it. He's very popular. That means he makes a lot of money. Yeah, that makes sense. Tends to be what celebrities do. Skipping this bit, honestly.
And yet, it's not entirely certain whether, as The Guardian puts it, viewers are listening or laughing.
And I have used this line before, but I'm going to use it again because I like it. They all laughed at us. Well, let me tell you, they're not laughing now, are they?
Tom, what's the point of this video at this point? Honestly, these whole two parts have effectively been you saying, look how much of a clown Nigel Farage is. But we know the ending to this story already. Like, everyone knows who is watching this. Nigel Farage is top of the polls. This video is called How the Far Right Took Over Britain. So far, I don't think I could actually tell you how that's happened. All you're trying to do is undermine Farage at every point here, and I don't think anyone could actually repeat back to you how the far right has taken over Britain yet. I don't think you should be near the end of the video and having that problem. What's the story here? Nigel Farage is laughed at by everyone and keeps going up. Great, why? Don't know. Wouldn't know from this video. I actually do know, but I wouldn't know from this video, hence I'm having to fill in a lot of gaps.
The whole thing is hopelessly low rent. But hey, as the saying goes, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And then you start doing cringy cameos and they start laughing at you again.
Well, he's rinsing and repeating, isn't he? He's rinsing and repeating pretty damn well. So yeah, looking back on this and saying we should laugh at him, probably a bad idea.
I want to pay tribute to Jeremy Corbyn, who led our party through some really difficult times, who energised our movement, and who's a friend as well as a colleague.
Well, how's that gone? Yeah, once again, when it comes to Keir Starmer, it's just incentives were put in front of him and he followed them. That's all the story's been with Starmer here. Yeah, he's not going to undermine Jeremy Corbyn when he was leader for the good part of a decade.
It's April 2020, and Keir Starmer has just been elected leader of the Labour Party, which is a turn-up.
To be fair, that is actually quite surprising. Again, he only became an MP in 2015. 5 years from an MP guaranteed Attorney General, should they win, to basically waiting out the Corbyn years to become leader. That's actually quite a meteoric rise. It's kind of no wonder he turns out to be useless.
And not only due to the crash and burn of his second referendum policy. See, both Brexit itself and subsequent support for folks like Nigel and Boris have repeatedly been framed in the media as a result of the down-to-earth English regions against a perceived London-centric liberal elite.
Well, yeah, that's mainly because that's what it was. Just look at this map of the share of the Leave vote. Very dark in areas that are, well, largely felt left behind, largely in the north and coastal areas. Very much remain in all of Scotland and London and other major cities, bar Scotland, where the elite are. And the reason Scotland want it was because they were a net benefactor of the EU, and also they just hate England, and England voted to leave, so they did the opposite.
When Jeremy Corbyn resigns as Labour leader, the received wisdom among the media class is that his successor should be a woman from outside London and the South East.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know why woman comes in. I know exactly why woman comes into it, but it's stupid. Outside the southeast, probably not a bad idea though. The problem you have is that Labour doesn't exactly have a wealth of choice outside there that isn't Angela Rayner or Rachel Reeves, which are two very funny women to bring up today. But, well, this video is more supposed to be timeless, so I won't comment on that.
Most of the candidates who put themselves up for the job tick at least one of the necessary boxes. Lisa Nandy, Rebecca Long-Bailey, Emily Thornberry. The very minute Keir puts his name in the ring, however, the criteria appear to bend to accommodate him.
Well, they didn't shortlist it, did they? They shortlist candidate selection when it comes to constituency and candidate roles. I don't think they shortlist it when it comes to the leadership roles. And I'm not being funny, but yeah, no wonder Keir won against all the others. Emily Thornberry is probably the only other person there that was competent. Rebecca Long-Bailey was a mad communist. Lisa Nandy was just a bit too much of an NPC. It was kind of no wonder Keir won. Labour is not a party of talent, and to be fair, neither are the Tories.
His pitch is simple. He presents himself as, in some respects, an heir to Jeremy, publishing a list of the progressive pledges, which he says maintain the party's radical values and are informed by what he calls the moral case for socialism.
Wow, I can't believe a man whose life has been entirely bureaucracy would effectively just say what people want to hear. It's almost like that's a received skill in the public service. Civil service, public sector, whatever.
Where he distances himself from the Corbyn project is in his supposed media savvy. In fact, the implication is that he might be able to use his pragmatic approach to get left-wing policies enacted.
Oh god, hearing that in hindsight, that is hilarious. Unfortunately, it turns out that the man who is a bureaucratic nightmare went into a job where everyone around you is a bureaucratic nightmare as well, and so, as Dominic Cummings keeps saying, he just follows what they say. I think I basically know where this is going now, where Keir Starmer helped ruin the country because he couldn't do anything and is letting Nigel win. Is that where we're going here?
And it works. In April 2020, in the depths of the first COVID lockdown, Keir is announced as the new leader of the Labour Party, and thus the party's next candidate for Prime Minister.
There were a lot of people who were not happy with that. He actually really played a blinder after that. He effectively culled the Corbyn area of the party. Maybe not culled, neutered's probably a more accurate word there. And a lot of people were not happy about that, obviously.
His pitch of socialism with an electable face, however, doesn't last long. Just 2 months in, Keir sacks Rebecca Long-Bailey, one of his former colleagues and leadership election rivals, from his shadow cabinet. The charge is one of anti-Semitism, albeit a pretty flimsy one. Rebecca's tweeted a newspaper article in which the actor Maxine Peake has, among many other issues, briefly discussed the Israeli military training US police. Just 4 months after that, Keir suspends Jeremy Corbyn from the Parliamentary Labour Party entirely.
Well, yeah, Labour had a massive anti-Semitism problem. I mean, you know, it's a bit of a veil, obviously, for just getting rid of the mad communist side of the party. The reason Rebecca Long-Bailey actually got kicked out, along with that anti-Semitic excuse, was because she said to trade unions that they need to effectively indoctrinate their members into socialism. And obviously in the Labour Party, if you're saying the quiet part out loud, you're completely useless. And so yeah, you deal with two birds with one stone there. You get rid of the anti-Semitism problem and you get rid of the communists. It's amazing how that Venn diagram crosses over so much.
Following a statement in which his predecessor condemns anti-Semitism, whilst also suggesting that accusations of anti-Semitism have been leveraged against him for political purposes. A report commissioned by Keir himself will later conclude that this was very much the case.
Politics is a nasty game, who would have thunk? It's always very funny these days when I do go into Normieverse and have conversations like this, because I'll hear people saying this is unfair and I'll effectively say, yeah, that's the game though. You have to play the game well. You might not like it, but this is how it works. And I don't think there's going to be any changing that, because this is how it's worked for the past 300 years pretty much.
But it's too late. Jeremy will never sit as a Labour MP again. This defenestration of people who Keir now sees as his political opponents is fascinating to watch.
Well, you say that, but it worked, didn't it? They won the election very comfortably. I know that's mainly because the Tory party imploded, but I'm going to be honest with you, I think if the left wing still had a very strong faction as of this point, I think the government will have imploded way sooner than it has at this point.
Perhaps you agree that the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn was anti-Semitic to its core. Perhaps you wouldn't go that far, but think it was a necessary PR move for Keir to distance himself from such accusations.
Oh yeah, definitely. That definitely had to happen. Literally no doubt about it. You have any sort of anti-Semitism in your party, even just accused, and you're screwed.
But whether pragmatic or principled, Keir's pivot to decrying the previous leadership of being deeply anti-Semitic involves him kind of pretending he wasn't there.
Yeah, it was kind of working, but now this government's falling apart, the left are realising maybe you need an alternative to Labour, and this is part of the reason I think Labour's going to cease to exist along with the Tories over the next 2 decades. At least as things stand now, but there could be, curveballs that come out of nowhere and completely change the landscape once again. Who knows? We're in clown decade.
He also quickly begins to pivot on policy. The 10 pledges which propelled him to the leadership are quietly abandoned. They gradually morph over the next couple of years into 5 missions, which are much more milquetoast. Opportunity for all, clean energy, safer streets.
I mean, not to be too defensive of Labour here, but what's wrong with that? What do you mean Jeremy Corbyn on a crazy left-wing ticket lost 3 times in a row? What do you mean Ed Miliband before him lost as well? What do you mean we shouldn't be full-on socialists? Yeah, that's how Labour win elections. Well, that's not really. That's how Tony Blair won elections, by pretending not to be a mad socialist. Post-Blair, we've had the most ridiculous cultural revolution ever, and people are now rejecting it with reform. They were trying to reject it for 14 years with the Tories, for God's sake.
The sheer vagueness of it all doesn't just disappoint lefties who thought they were backing the more radical version of the former lawyer. 6 months before the announcement of the 2024 election, polling company Savanta asks what word people are most likely to use to describe Keir, and the most popular response is boring.
Well, boring won an election, so deal with it. Honestly, I'm not being funny, but if you're a politician and the most common word used for you is boring, that's actually a success. that's actually successful. I think you've got to understand that. Politics is very, very boring. And if you are boring, you are doing politics quite well. Now, don't get me wrong, Keir Starmer's who we're talking about. Nigel Farage is completely the opposite. But he's a maverick, he's an insurgent. Now, that's a completely different playing field. Effectively, you want boring when things are going well. And at that point, things were going well for Labour, so you want that. If things aren't going well for you, you want a maverick like Thatcher or Blair or, well, Boris Johnson as well as another example. Or Nigel Farage if he's part of the insurgent party. Politics is all about timing, I will say that to my grave.
And yet, behind the scenes, Keir appears pretty pleased. Because his perceived tediousness contrasts with a Conservative government which is compelling to watch for all of the worst reasons.
Does this guy only have one cadence that he speaks in, which is disapproving? Honestly, I've covered quite a few of his videos now, and every time he's got the same cadence of effectively sounding like he's disappointed in the planet.
Keir ends up outlasting 3 Tory prime ministers, all of whom leave office in some form of disgrace.
Being fair to Sunak, he definitely did not leave in disgrace. Sunak was given a really bad hand to deal with and, well, to be honest with you, left with some grace.
After 13 years of pretty chaotic Conservative rule, the country appears to be crying out for change.
Sort of. I think they were just crying out for competence and, well, the only party really that had any was Labour. Yes, I am a reform simp, but let's be real, they were very much a protest vote back in 2024. It's been a year, that's no longer the case. I suppose you could technically call that change, but the problem is that Tom is saying that as in people wanted socialism. The problem Tom has is that we had 14 years, well, no, technically we had 2 decades or more of covert socialism, so there you go.
And when Rishi Sunak announces a general election will be held on the 4th of July 2024, that is exactly what Keir offers up. The slogan of change might be vague as hell, but that's kind of its appeal.
Oh, well, at least he's getting it now, I suppose. What I find weird about this is that his whole Nigel Farage bit was Nigel Farage is a big influencer. Okay, but he didn't even mention reform at the election. I think it's really important to talk about that because an insurgent party on basically their first go properly trying to get a number of seats, getting 4 is actually pretty good, even if it is less than the exit poll predicted.
When, on the 4th of July 2024, Keir Starmer strides into the Willingham Close Tenants and Residents Association Hall to cast his vote, then he's feeling pretty positive about everything that's to come.
Okay, that was a dreadful part. Actually, no, to be fair, it was a half good part, half dreadful part. The stuff on Starmer, fine, yeah, you went through a political analysis there. When it came to Farage, what did you mention? Oh, he's big on TikTok and went on I'm a Celeb. I think it's really important that you go through how the election went for reform. Unless you're going to do it in the next part, but I could not tell you why he titled this The Men Who Broke Britain. Britain's been broken since 2008. We just never recovered from the Blair Brown years. And here he is giving literally no reason as to why Nigel Farage is the problem. And I still don't know why Keir Starmer is, aside from he moved away from communism.
This was supposed to be it. This could have been it. Order restored. After the derailments of the Jeremy Corbyn years and the chaos of Brexit, Keir Starmer's ascendancy to the prime ministership is interpreted by some in the media as a sign that pragmatism, technocracy, and measured sensible centrism is back.
Oh god, please go through some of the highlights of that, honestly. The entire centrist dad media losing their minds, saying the adults are back in the room, we finally have some stability. Honestly, we're just over a year later. He's had to reshuffle. A complete major reshuffle. He did a mini one earlier this week, for God's sake, and largely that was to poach Reeves's staff. Basically as a way to say, go away.
The darkness represented by Nigel and his ilk has been cast out.
I don't think people were quite saying that. They did acknowledge that they got 4 million votes on 4 seats. Let's be absolutely fair here.
It only helps to confirm this narrative that Keir's victory seems to mirror that of Joe Biden, who's managed to return 2000s-era liberalism to the White House a few years earlier.
No, that was by far the wokest administration that we had ever seen. What are you talking about? It was by no means 2000s liberalism, it was post-Black Lives Matter 2020s nonsense. That's why Trump won by a bigger margin in 2024.
Keir's victory even seems, on paper, inarguable. With 411 out of a possible 650 seats in the House of Commons, his promise of change has gifted him the 4th largest majority in Parliament ever.
Yes, but I would assume that you're now going to go into how it's not actually a solid majority, and we're, well, very much seeing the result of that recently.
This perpetual winner had won yet again. But Keir and Nigel's fortunes are about to flip, and all of this will quickly begin to seem like little more than a dream.
Trust me, the way politics is going at the moment, the people in charge, absolute disaster. Literally everything outside of it, reforms rise and things like that. Yeah, I would assume I died and went to heaven if you told me this would be the result 2-3 years ago. Hell, even a year ago, what am I talking about?
Let's switch things up a bit and start with Keir. It's not that Keir hadn't set himself up for success. In fact, his victory had been the result of remarkable planning. The number of actual votes the Labour Party had received hadn't changed all that much from the previous election, with Keir increasing Labour's vote share by just 1.6%.
With less overall votes despite having a larger population, yes, that's largely down to the fact that the Tory vote collapsed, for obvious reasons.
Which isn't to say that there isn't a genuine mood for change in the air. But what Keir has managed to do is achieve an exceptionally efficient election campaign.
Sure, the problem you had is that, yes, people wanted change, but they didn't exactly trust the smaller parties enough to make the leap, so to speak. So most people who voted Tory and wanted change stayed at home. Whereas if you're on the left, you didn't quite have the collapse that the Tories had, so you just keep voting Labour. Even, obviously, despite the whole thing with Corbyn, you saw it only lost him 500,000 votes. So, correct, there was a change, and I know some people who specifically voted Labour, having not voted before in their life, just to get the Tories out. But that wasn't necessarily an endorsement of Keir Starmer, because ultimately a lot of people correctly see them as pretty much the same.
Securing just the right number of votes in just the right towns and cities to turn that tiny swing in support into a massive swing in seats.
I think it's going to be very difficult to talk about this without pointing out the whole collapse of the Tories. Labour obviously put effort in to their campaign. Fine, but there's way more to it than just the good that they did in their campaign, and it wasn't a bad campaign, but the reason for a big swing was also a Tory collapse.
Aware of the infighting which had frustrated Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, Keir has also worked to eliminate any and all opposition from within his own party by effectively banning left-wing candidates from standing and replacing them with those perceived to be loyal to the Starmer project.
Oh my God, he kept Diane Abbott and who's the other one, John McDonnell on side. I don't know about that one necessarily. But yeah, Labour candidates who were very much just, I'm in it for Corbyn, obviously you got to get rid of them.
Once in power, however, exactly what the Starmer project is becomes foggier than ever. But even with his hands firmly gripped around the levers of the state, Keir continues to recede from revealing any central guiding belief.
Oh, his guiding belief's really obvious if you just pay attention. His guiding belief is basically whatever the bureaucracy dictates. The problem is that Tom only listens to other left-wing voices, so he'll never bother listening to someone like Dominic Cummings, who makes it quite clear what a lot of politicians, it's not just Keir, but what a lot of politicians do is become NPCs and basically just follow whatever the civil service tell them to do. That's why you got rid of winter fuel payments, or tried to get rid of winter fuel payments, because effectively it's, oh, well, that's got to go, we've not got the money for it, and it's really easy to get rid of. But obviously people go nuts because people don't want to get rid of that while you're paying billions and billions and billions for the Chagos Island to be given away, and while you're putting a load of illegals in hotels.
This becomes most shameless in matters of foreign policy. After Joe Biden is replaced by a resurgent Donald Trump, Keir has to regularly appear in press conferences alongside a man who represents exactly the kind of chaotic populism he despises.
Oh, stupid, tedious, left-wing, sixth-form political analysis here. Pathetic. You should be better than this. You have 500,000 subscribers. It's called basic diplomacy. Yes, in politics you deal with an awful lot of foreign powers you don't like. Very simple. I mean, what do you want him to do? Get in a punch-up with an 80-year-old man who's head of America? I don't think so.
And yet, he opts to bend the knee. This includes the former human rights lawyer defending Israel's cutting off of power to Gaza.
Well, maybe Gaza shouldn't start a war that they're going to obviously lose then. What do you want? I am so fed up of leftists. This is pathetic.
And despite later criticising the country's ongoing genocide, defending the export of UK-made fighter jet parts to the offending state.
Damn, we sell weapons to an ally? Crazy.
Things are similarly muted when it comes to domestic policy. Less than a month after taking power, Keir's Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, stands up in the House of Commons and purports to reveal a hitherto unknown £22 billion black hole in the nation's yearly finances.
Yeah, I've done a few videos on that. Turned out 9 billion or so of it was due to public sector pay rises that Labour had committed to, and a few other things that weren't actually the Tories' fault. It was all political theatre, and now they've got a 50 billion black hole a year later, so they clearly didn't deal with it.
Left, she says, by the previous administration. Exactly how secret this black hole had ever been is uncertain.
Well, civil service have known that they're out of money for ages. It wasn't a secret to them. To the public, though, public finances are all over the place. Probably wasn't reported on by journalists, let's say, to some degree, but who cares? It's 22 billion. The simple thing to do would have been to cut some things, which they did try and do, and then never did because they have crazy left-wing backbenchers.
But to Keir and his team, it provides a useful opportunity to do, well, even less than they'd promised. His government doesn't quite become one of absolute austerity, and yet neither does it seem genuinely confident about its willingness to invest in the country and its people.
How can you invest when you're 22 billion in the red? What are you talking about? Oh, just slap on a wealth tax. Great, that funds the NHS for about 2 months. That's it. We're spending something like 28 billion a year on debt payments alone. That's just the interest, by the way. And at the moment now, because you have crazy leftist backbenchers in Labour, the cost of borrowing is going up and up and up. This is why business is flocking to reform, because they're actually going to deal with this.
The much-needed upgrade to the country's crowded rail network, which had been cynically cancelled by the Conservatives, remains cancelled.
Cynically cancelled? I don't think you understand, Tom. We do not have money. We don't have any. The public sector is broke. This is despite the fact they have literally never had more money as a percentage of GDP. The public sector is about half the size of the GDP. That is basically socialism. Some would call it Norway-style socialism, if you will. The thing is, Norway isn't mad because they actually drill for their oil to top up their funds. We crippled that. So no, you can't have your super fast train that gets you from Manchester to London 10 minutes quicker. We do not have the money for it.
A cap on child benefit payments, which is widely considered to have increased child poverty, remains in place.
Oh man, relative poverty, that is a statistic that has to go. That is the most ridiculous thing that the Blair and Brown government redefined. We used to actually measure poverty by, well, actual poverty, i.e. the way the UN defines it, but obviously basically nobody falls under that in the United Kingdom because we solved it. So to excuse a whole load of policy that they wanted to do, they had to redefine it. And now it just means if your income's less than 60% of the current median wage, then you're technically in poverty, which is largely meaningless because clearly people are eating because barely anyone goes to hospital for malnutrition, and basically everyone has iPads and TVs.
There are some movements towards delivering a manifesto pledge to build 1.5 million homes, but housing policy remains tied to a broken model of private builders, poor quality homes, and steadily inflating prices.
Sorry, but new builds are so I've learned so much from local councils and reform councillors. Basically, new build housing is entirely tied to government targets, and the government does just tell you where they can be built and should be built. And the council really has no say in it. The problem is that obviously private investment doesn't necessarily want to put money in for it, and money they do want to put in, they end up in front of planning laws that won't let them build where they want to. If you think we have a free market when it comes to housing, you are absolutely mad. It's as simple as that.
Where fresh investment does come is in the form of increased military spending. Keir announces a £13.4 billion hike in defence spending.
Yeah, but even the 30 billion going to Chagos is put under defence. They've not actually increased funding for it. All they've done is move things that weren't under the defence umbrella to under the defence umbrella. There's not actually more funding going towards it. They're just moving things around and redefining yet again. And that's basically just to keep America happy so that we can stay in NATO. Army pensions come under defence spending. That's a little bit ridiculous.
He orders new nuclear weapons and the planes to drop them.
Damn based, you know, Starmer isn't all bad.
As cuts are made to welfare spending owing to an apparent lack of funds, the cap on arms spending seems to have no limit.
I don't know if you've realised this, but there's been quite a few wars going on recently. Israel, our ally, has basically been under attack from every neighbouring country. Ukraine, our ally, or at the very least is on our side of the fence against Russia, is very much in a war that has been going on for some time. Yeah, we're in a bit of a volatile world. Spending on defence makes perfect sense, but you're a leftist, so you wouldn't understand that. And again, all the spending's fake anyway, so why am I defending Starmer? This is how bad leftists are. They trick me into defending Starmer. And I hate Starmer.
In fact, what counts for a job strategy is increasingly also largely built around the arms industry.
Defence is like one of the only things that even libertarians understand, yeah, obviously the government's going to be in charge of that. I can't believe that the government's main strategy is actually more of my ideal than I think the Tories were. And here a leftist is effectively saying, why don't you give millionaire pensioners more money? It's crazy.
More than anything, however, Keir seems to dedicate as much of his time as possible to telling the nation how he's going to smash the gangs, profiting from asylum seekers crossing the English Channel.
Yeah, it was a stupid idea, but at least he was saying he'd do something about illegal migration. How many people believed him? Barely anyone, to be honest with you. I don't know a single person that thought it would work.
He shares videos of immigration raids and tweets endlessly about deportations.
Yeah, and it's very obviously fake. It's kind of cute to watch.
The light progressivism and promises of investment in public services which were made during the election campaign are replaced by a small c conservatism of fear and loathing.
I mean, call it fear and loathing if you want, but reality is that we have rules and we want them enforced. That's basically it. And nobody believes this anyway because, by the way, a year before this, as you have gone through, it was a massive progressive and making apologia for illegal migration. What's actually happened here is that the left has completely collapsed because they have no idea how to actually deal with the problems that are in front of them at the moment, whereas when you look at reform and the centre-right, they are getting together a plan to actually improve the country that goes beyond give more money to wealthy pensioners.
One wonders what that rising human rights lawyer would think.
He'd rub his hands together and be like, man, I can't believe all these people that are going to give me, or the government, sorry, is going to give me money to defend. Do you think, like, what principles do you think he had here? The reason he did the whole McDonald's thing was so that he could up his profile. He doesn't believe in anything other than the bureaucracy. How are you this blind?
And yet, as Keir sees it, this is just another pragmatic pivot. Because while he might have all but destroyed the Conservative Party during the general election...
Again, no, that's not what happened. The Tory Party destroyed themselves because the Tory Party is split between Liberal Democrats and Reform voters. They just have a leftover Broadchurch that they've had for quite some time because it was winning them elections for 2 centuries. Well, I'm afraid at this point, because they've not been focusing on the right wing enough, they completely collapse themselves. Because what's the point of voting for them when you can just vote for the Lib Dems for the same thing?
He's now found himself face to face with a challenger who's been stalking him for quite some time.
He has challenged me to a head-to-head debate.
Yeah. The man rising in the polls, that tends to be the person that the incumbent power tend to look at for ideas. The problem is with Starmer is that it's all very fake and that he doesn't actually do anything of substance. I don't understand why you're saying this has destroyed Britain. Britain's already destroyed at this point. What has Starmer or Farage got to actually do with that? Very little. This is pretty much entirely on the Tories.
See, there was another contributing factor to Keir's election win, which quickly turned from a blessing into a curse.
That was always going to be a curse. I rewatched snippets of my election coverage the other day that I did live, and realistically the outlook was, wow, 4 seats, that's really good. It looks like we can get going places. Okay, it's not 13, but realistically all we expected was Farage to win. But no, it's Farage, Anderson, Tyson, Lowe. Obviously Lowe's gone. No, Murdoch won as well, sorry. We got 5. We didn't get 4, we got 5. It's just one of them left. Sorry, let's phrase that properly. He got kicked out. And then we got another in a by-election, then we lost another, because he had some dodgy dealings in the past that are still being criminally investigated, I understand. So it could go back to 6, but you never know. Hopefully there'll be a by-election soon anyway and Reform will win that.
Nigel had initially ruled out running as a candidate for the Reform Party in 2024. He'd handed over the leadership to fellow pro-Brexit multimillionaire and former property investor Richard Tice.
Probably the second best MP for me at this point. I really like Richard Tice. He's an unsung hero, I think, as he was a man who was personally bankrolling Reform for all the years Nigel wasn't being involved and doing what he could to try and keep it going. And you know what? He got it to a level 10 to 12% in the polls. Not bad.
Another true man of the people. It perhaps seemed easier to simply cash those cameo checks and enjoy the show. It's with just a month to go before the election that he changes his mind. The management structure of the Reform Party is, at the time, slightly odd. Where the Labour Party and Conservative parties require leaders to be elected by their members, as one might expect, Reform is effectively a limited company whose shareholders are free to pick whoever they would like.
Yeah, sure, and they've changed that now, it's probably fair to point out. And on top of that, part of the reason Nigel Farage did come back as leader is because everywhere he was going campaigning, people were saying, can you please come back, we really need you. And well, he did come back because of all that, let's face it, begging from ordinary people. I'm not being funny, but you're in the middle of the election. You do not have time to have a leadership election like that, do you?
With Nigel owning 53% of the company's stock, that effectively means that he has complete control. When, on the 3rd of June, Richard announces that he will be stepping down to allow Nigel to resume his post as leader, then the truth is, he probably didn't have much choice.
No, and I don't know why it's such a surprising fact, but a lot of people in Reform, pretty much everyone in Reform, to be honest with you, was very happy with that. When it was announced, there was a very loud cheer. And again, why Richard Tice an unsung hero? Swallowed his pride and allowed it to happen and is now deputy leader. To be honest, I kind of hope he becomes leader in the future. I think he's pretty good. Either him or Zia. I really don't mind which. Because ultimately, an awful lot of people in Reform, and I know this both through personal experience and via things I hear, everyone's pretty much on board for the movement and the cause that it represents.
Nigel announces that he'll be contesting the seat of Clacton, a small seaside town on the Essex coast. Which might seem like a random pick, and yet it has a history of supporting his political vision.
Not a random pick at all, what do you mean? You went through in the last couple of parts about Douglas Carswell standing there. That was literally his constituency. Well, the constituency that literally voted UKIP, the only one to, by the way, for Parliament. Of course you're going to stand there for Reform.
It was Clacton which had elected one of UKIP's first elected MPs back in 2015.
But you bring that up, why are you saying it's a random pick? This is a really badly structured video. You don't pretend something seems really random when you've literally gone through for an entire part the whole Clacton drama. What are you on about?
And so, if this 8th attempt at breaking into Parliament is going to be successful, Clacton seems like the place.
Yeah, and it works. If anything, this should be a story about perseverance. You should absolutely persevere because you never know where it's going to get you. I'm learning that pretty largely recently, actually.
Nigel's campaign is the complete opposite of Keir's. Where Keir seeks to keep his promises as vague as possible, Nigel is spoiling for a fight. This strategy of division occasionally comes back to bite him. The very day he launches his candidacy, he gets a milkshake thrown over him whilst leaving a Wetherspoons.
Sorry, that's not a result of his contract. What are you on about? That was a callback to 2019 when milkshaking seemed to become the in thing. Farage got hit with it a couple of times. Carl Benjamin got hit with it as well. It was a crazy time, and the sensible centrist dads are all trying to defend it for some reason.
But this is a man who is able to transform any publicity into good publicity.
My milkshake brings all the people to the rally.
Well, yeah, I'm not shocked a man who had 30 years experience of campaigning knows how to turn a story like this and get all the attention to stay on you and make it positive.
Keir might want to believe that his 2024 election victory was a thumping win delivered by savvy electoral strategy. The polling, however, tells a different story.
As I say, I really hate the way this video is structured. I guess it's because he's trying to keep an air of mystery about this whole thing, but in reality, well, all it is doing is annoying me, but it would do. The problem is that throughout this video, he's phrased Keir Starmer's win in all the times earlier as Keir Starmer did really well because of this campaign strategy, and I've obviously corrected him. The thing is now, right at the end of the video, is where he corrects himself.
The year leading up to voting day had seen a steady and then rapid decline in support for the Conservative Party. And yet, it wasn't Keir who was picking up those votes. The key beneficiary was Nigel's Reform Party.
Yes, that was certainly part of it, but for some reason he's still not bringing up the main thing, which was the total collapse of the Tories because of their 14 years of failure. That's the main reason. Reform are just capitalising on that, as well as Labour.
This would have been bad enough for the Conservatives in any event. But the UK's first past the post electoral system means that in many constituencies it works to split the right-wing vote between the Conservatives and Reform, allowing Labour to waltz in and pick up those hundreds and hundreds of new seats.
Oh, finally, an entire sentence where I have literally no complaints. Well done.
When Nigel finally manages to win his seat in Parliament in Clacton, then it might seem bittersweet. Electoral calculus has once again made it impossible to convert significant popular support into seats.
Oh, no, it wasn't bittersweet. We celebrated on the stream. We were really happy. We were looking forward to the next 4 years, and it's been so much better than we expected. I suppose it's funny looking at this from two different perspectives. I know leftists always pretend that they haven't been winning, but leftists have been winning. They just pretend that they haven't. The right have been losing for decades, and to finally have that look of light at the end of the tunnel, like things can get better, that was heartwarming. It happened with Boris, and it was quite quickly rug pulled within a year or two. With Farage, it looks like it's going to be somewhat different. It might not be, and we might get disappointed again, you never know, but for now, given that they have 3 and a bit years to plan, well, the good part of the 4th year actually of that, then yeah, I'm very much willing to continue being an activist.
Reform manages to claim just 5 spots in the House of Commons. And yet, this time, something has shifted. Because the Conservatives haven't just lost an election, they've been absolutely demolished.
Oh yeah, 100 seats was actually quite surprising. There were some people who thought that it could even be in the double digits. In fact, I was one of them. But even the people who were more optimistic than that, they were surprised with how low it was.
A disastrous 14-year stint in government has completely delegitimised them in the eyes of the public.
The last thing he says on the election is the main part, which is, yeah, 14 years of failure killed them. It's the last thing he brings up. You should structure your video in the opposite way, or at least I do.
When, after the election, polling begins to show voter share reuniting under a single right-wing party, then it's no longer the former most successful political party in the modern world which is the beneficiary. It's Reform.
Yeah, the right-wingers died and went to heaven. You can't convince me otherwise. This is just incredible.
Better still, in an age of political disaffection, Reform is also able to sweep up voters who previously might have voted Labour, promising a revolution in the way the country is governed.
And God knows we need one, because we have been living through a revolution for the past 20 years or so.
Reform may only have a handful of actual seats. Keir may technically be a Prime Minister with a historic majority. But just a year into his premiership, pollsters reveal that if another election were to be held that day, Reform would sweep the country, picking up 290 seats and beating Labour down to just 126.
And it's only got better than that since. I mean, at some point, obviously, it's going to come back to bite Reform in some way or another. It's bound to happen, it's politics. But I don't think it's going to be enough to kill Reform. I don't think really anything can do that now, apart from Reform's own mistakes, which largely they seem to be either getting away with or not making any at all in other cases. As much as a lot of the dork right would like to make you think.
Just over a year has now passed since the 2024 general election seemed to show that the technocratic order that Keir is the very personification of appeared to have taken back control. And the UK is now staring down the barrel of perhaps its most right-wing government ever.
Read some history, man. We were giving gay men hormones, estrogen, as a punishment for their buggery. As far back as the 1960s, 1950s, or was Alan Turing? I can't even remember. We've had ridiculous leftist governments pretty much since Tony Blair, and even Margaret Thatcher, when it came to social issues, she was right-wing, but my god, she was not like we were in the Victorian era. Most right-wing government ever. Read some history. Even 20th century history. We were right-wing, especially in terms of social issues.
Let me show you one last video. Even 2 years ago, If I had asked you who had posted this video to Twitter, there would have been no doubt that the answer was Nigel.
Or maybe out of a choice between Starmer and Nigel, but I would definitely ask you, why the hell's Nigel posting that?
But you probably already guessed by now that I'm going to tell you it was Keir. I think it's tempting for many liberals to read the intertwining tales of Keir and Nigel as the story of one politician who failed and failed and failed until he didn't, and another who consistently succeeded until he suddenly lost.
Kind of. I mean, yep, that's kind of accurate. We're not quite at the succeeded and lost point with Starmer and Keir. Starmer and Keir are the same person. Starmer and Farage yet, but I'd be interested to know what your alternative story is here.
And yet there's a difference between being in office and being in power.
Oh my god, he thinks Nigel's in power. Nigel is currently commanding the Overton window right. I will give you that, but to say that we have some sort of right-wing government here, crazy.
Keir's victories have only ever really been technical. He might have had the election results and job titles and chauffeurs, but the political trajectory of the UK through the course of his adult life would likely have horrified that young civil rights lawyer.
I mean, if you ignore all the social progress that was brought in by the Tories, sure, you know, the Tories gave us gay marriage, the Tories gave us the Tavistock Centre where kids were being transed. Under the Tories, we got the most ridiculous gay flags ever. Prides, for some reason, became really mainstream. And you even had them not dealing with Black Lives Matter when they were getting violent. I'm not being funny, but if you think we've gone right-wing, you're in for a hell of a 2030s.
Nigel's career might officially have been one of failure. But even if he doesn't win the next election, he's pretty much got everything he ever wanted.
Oh, hell no. No. We have not got anywhere near what we want. You think we're happy with what Starmer's doing? Are you mad? Sorry, Starmer gave away Chagos and we had to pay Mauritius for that. Illegal migration is higher than ever and migration has steadied at about 300,000 net. That is way too high in both regards. We still live in a country where public spending is literally the most it's ever been in Britain. No, we currently have the most left-wing government ever, bar maybe Tony Blair, and even then that's only if you incorporate the economic side of things. Socially, it was probably Cameron, possibly Johnson. So yeah, there's obviously going to be a reaction for this, because for 14 years people voted against it, and then they stopped voting last year. And next time, oh, it's gonna be a hell of a vote, because we have got nowhere near what we want. Do not be naive.
It's perhaps easy to recognise how Nigel has broken British politics. It's perhaps harder to acknowledge how Keir and the centrist politics which he represents has contributed to that failure too.
Yeah, I thought this was literally the argument is, oh, Keir is an NPC, and Farage's NPC meant going left and left and left, and then he went right a bit, and that's what's destroyed politics. No, I'm afraid it's the opposite. Going left and left and left is what killed it. We are now just picking up the pieces. Liz Truss didn't destroy the economy, it was already broken when she got there. And we have still not fixed it, by the way.
Politicians who, like Keir, no doubt started out with good intentions and who would like to have thought of themselves as a bulwark against ugly right-wing extremism, and who have nevertheless gradually come to embrace so many of its elements.
Oh, he's deporting illegal immigrants, oh, nasty, Hitler, come on, man. All you need to do is throw a bit of red meat out and you can probably have a socialist ingsoc. Literally just get rid of the illegals and we'd probably be in this problem forever, but immigration has absolutely destroyed its own argument thanks to Boris Johnson, and here you are for some reason blaming Keir Starmer. Oh, he was supposed to be like Corbyn but covert. Yeah, that was never going to work. Tories would obviously have won again if that was the case. Because you cannot be a covert socialist, it doesn't work. It's just people get lazy, that's the only reason the Fabian Society worked.
This is, they would surely argue, a pragmatic move in service of some greater good. But as progressive policies continue to be few and far between, what exactly that greater good is remains to be seen.
It's basically impossible to get any more progressivism in because you had 20 odd years of it. You know, we've had it, it's done. You've got gay marriage. The trans side of things went way too far and people got fed up with it. You know, it's over. The left-wing vote's going to be stuck in student areas and that's going to be about it. Because students are either normal people or the ridiculous communists, and then you get the odd fascist maybe. And even the fascists don't like Farage. He's too left-wing for them. So think about that, Mr. Nicholas.
More than this, it seems only logical that voters should struggle to back a group of politicians who don't seem to know exactly what they believe themselves.
Yes, politics is show business for ugly people. That's been very well known for quite some time. Thank you for catching up. The problem comes in, or the solution comes in that when that showman actually has some intellectual rigour. And believe it or not, that is Nigel and the team backing him. You can tell just by the basic fact that they have a complete alternative to the modern day and the politics we find ourselves in. Corbyn to some degree is the same, by the way. Tony Blair was the same. Margaret Thatcher was the same. William Gladstone was the same. There's a few prime ministers that are like that, and they tend to come out when needed.
Let alone be able to convince us of those beliefs. Politicians who are the polar opposite of that principled lawyer we met at the beginning of this video.
Sorry to burst your bubble here, but lawyers aren't typically principled, they're just doing a job. Again, Keir Starmer did that job for the McLibel case unpaid because it was very high profile, and it helped him climb the greasy pole. That's part of the reason he got to the CPS in the end, or head of the CPS in the end, because he did that work that was very high profile. I guess sorry to burst your bubble on that, but there's very few actually fully principled people out in the world, and you and me are not either of those people either. I know I try to be, and I'm sure you try to be, but let's be real, especially with what I've seen in this video, you're hardly pure yourself.
There's an irony to the fact that their hollow pragmatism should run aground on the rocks of a man whose political strategy has relied precisely on not bending his principles for anyone.
Certainly bending them less, but let's be real, the man was a neo-Thatcherite, but he's not so much these days anymore. Part of the reason probably is to get votes, and I can understand that. It's just, surely you want them to bend to what the people want. That's the point in democracy. Well, that's what he's doing, and that's why he's at 30-odd% in the polls, absolutely everywhere these days.
Which would be funny if the consequences for the country weren't likely to be quite so bleak.
Oh, you being upset with Reform getting in power makes me want to vote for them even harder, by the way. I wish I had 3 votes just to annoy you. Now, I pretty much guarantee Reform is going to be the best government the country has had since early Blair, and the only reason early Blair was good was because he was riding off the wave of Thatcherism.
In fact, finding ways to act on our principles in a world where it feels like the political structures which surround us are deeply unresponsive.
He goes into an advert, I'm not covering it, if you want to see it, look at his video. The problem you have with Tom Nicholas is that he will make long videos like this and they will basically be just a long reason to shill whatever he's got to say at the end. It's usually nebula, it wasn't this case. But it's all just part of the game. But I thought I'd go through it anyway just to see how the leftists are doing, as it turns out they are losing their minds. So with that, I think I'll leave it there. Right, in terms of shilling, tomorrow it's Laughing at the Guardian with some whammon. Tuesday it is Tosh Talks. Thursday I'm finishing off Hollow Knight, and then videos out as and when I can make them. Do subscribe to the channel, do leave a like, do leave a comment, and on top of that, do become a channel member and leave super chats and super thanks as well. They really help out the channel. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.